Hey everybody, Bob Lucero here from All Things Leland. I'm pleased to have as our guest Scott Mooneyham from the North Carolina League of Municipalities. 50% or so of Brunswick County residents are from other states, and logically, folks have a lot of questions about what authorities local governments have or not. I originally lived in a home rule state where local governments had a lot more authority than localities here do in North Carolina, which is a Dillon rule state. So, hey, Scott, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
You're welcome. Let's get right into it because there's been a lot of discussion about Senate Bill 382, which limited local government's abilities to downzone property without the permission of the local property owner. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about that and some of the other things that you are seeing in Raleigh or have seen in Raleigh the past legislative session.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the downzoning provision, which essentially requires all property owners to approve large-scale changes in the unified development ordinances or large-scale zoning changes, which is basically makes those things pretty impractical to do because it's just if you're trying to zone or rezone large tracts through a comprehensive plan, it's just impossible to find every property owner. So at any rate, that provision was tucked onto a large bill at the end of 2024. And, so the I don't believe that legislators understood the full effects of that. At least by and large, most
Mhm.
legislators did not, because I would say that over time, that provision will actually hinder development. Even though, maybe there was a particular property owner here or there that thought they were somehow being treated unfairly, which led to this provision being put into the
Mhm.
law. Um, I think that unfortunately, we were talking a little bit before that you started doing the interview, and unfortunately, trying to address that in this past legislative session sort of became a casualty to some of the other um, pieces of legislation, including one that was pretty radical that would have taken away local development authority. And so a lot of the focus was on making sure that didn't happen.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, in looking at some of the bills, there's some effort to repeal that provision that was passed in Senate Bill 382. I believe it passed one of the houses. I think it passed the Senate and is waiting for the House or vice versa.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sorry, I've forgotten too now, but I think
yeah.
that is correct. Yeah.
There's a lot of this the bills come and go and then they die for whatever reason. I mean when you talk to folks over here in Leland, which is a fast growing community in
Yeah.
Brunswick County, fastest growing county
Yeah.
in North Carolina, there's a lot of concern about preserving open space, bigger areas of tree save or flood ordinances. All of this have been caught up in the Senate Bill 382 as folks are afraid that it could be seen as a effort to downzone through different regulatory processes. As you talk to local governments throughout North Carolina, Scott, other than there not being a state budget yet and its implications on education funding, et cetera, what do you hear from local governments throughout North Carolina?
Well, regarding that downzoning provision, what I hear is that there are a number that have delayed the adoption of unified development ordinances right now because they, as you say, they fear the legal consequences of that. I think that there are other cases where what they're dealing with is smaller, and they reach a very critical point. I mean, by that I mean smaller um, zoning changes, but still say more than one tract, and they reach critical situations where maybe they can't get in touch with a single property owner. And, I'm not sure what they're doing in those cases. I don't think it would be shocking that they, after they make all these inquiries and everything, that they roll the dice, because potentially you're holding up if you a project that, and by roll the dice, I mean roll the legal dice that they're not going to
Hmm.
be taken to court, because potentially you're holding up something that may mean jobs and, particularly when you're talking around commercial development stuff, that could mean jobs and economic activity in the community.
I mean, there's a great example here in Leland that occurred before the Senate bill passed. The town realized that they needed to preserve business commercial zone properties, so they took residential uses out of those zoning districts. This was done before Senate Bill 382. If Senate Bill 382 had passed, that would have been an impossibility just because of, what we're talking about
Yeah,
being
you would
able
have
to
incurred legal liability for
yeah,
sure if you had done that.
significant
Yeah.
in a town that is a lot of rooftops, still not a decent amount of commercial, still growing commercial, preserving that ability to preserve those tracks for non-residential uses is critically important. I mean, one of the interesting things and we talked about this briefly earlier, is the fact that state legislature looks to perhaps solve a problem that really is not a problem, and one of them is uh, project approvals. Putting on artificial deadlines for a project to go through a planning review. As a member of the planning board in Leland, the technical review committee sends out, hey, here's these plans. Do you have any comments? So on and so forth. And there's a lot of experts on that. Do you think that something like that has any chance of passing? Realizing, look, it's probably uh, no one should predict what a legislature is going to do. But I mean, do you hear a lot of that from your colleagues throughout the state?
Do you mean that a downzoning repeal would happen, or yeah? Um,
No, just when someone submits plans for a project and they have to go through a technical review,
oh,
and now there's this creating this artificial deadline.
artificial
You
time
have to do it
clocks and
within this certain
yeah.
period of time.
There's been some of that has passed before, so I think,
Right.
yeah, that's something that's always out there, that those time clock bills and provisions. It seems like they're a perennial sort of issue, and sometimes provisions pass that have a slight effect on planning departments and how they have to consider those things. And I think, fortunately, as an organization, we've been able to prevent the things that would become more onerous, and frankly, just, through education,
Mm.
because the planning staffs are limited. Do you want to increase the cost? I mean, it's just which end of the tube do you push on the tube, something comes out of one end, right? So
Yes,
it's,
sir.
yeah, I mean, you can't, if you're going to say, okay, I want to um, lessen these approval timelines, and how do you do that except to increase staff size? If you increase staff size, you increase the cost, and if you don't
Yeah.
want to put the cost on the general taxpayer, you're going to have to put it on the development process itself.
So it's a catch 22, one way or the other. Something's going
Yeah,
to happen. I mean,
yeah.
I look at organizations like NCLM as preserving a local voice, in these processes. At the end of the day, and it's an overused term, but the rubber really meets the road in local government. Whether or not it's schools or courts or the sheriff or fire safety, public safety, etc. So, taking away tools from local governments hinders their ability to be responsive to people who who have a need or a service. I mean, one of the things that I hear a lot about, or you read about on in social media is, well, let's impose impact fees. So let me just ask you straight out, Scott, can a locality impose impact fees on a developer?
No, not generally speaking, no.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
or broadly speaking, no. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's things like in Virginia where you could work with a developer on proffers. Here, as I understand it, is that unless you go into a zoning process with the agreement of the property owner, other than conforming to the UDO, other negotiated things would require an agreement between the two parties.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when it comes to that sort of conditional zoning process,
Mhm.
I think that is one of the areas where local governments do have, um, some authority, and that we fought to preserve that authority,
Right,
because it's, what that does, Bob, is it when you have a negotiated process for, let's say, I mean, in large cities, a lot of this stuff involves mixed use
right,
developments. And what that does, it allows for community consensus at the end
right.
of the day, because by negotiating some things with the developer, you bring on board the the residents of the area. You try to represent their interest
Sure.
in this as well. And so at the end of the day, hopefully you come out with a project that the existing residents, the developer, and the municipality are all satisfied with. And so you avoid the political implications
Yeah,
of an approval
yeah,
that people in the community don't want. And
yeah.
sometimes it's a situation where I've heard there was a former legislator who said, we'll take the heat. And honestly, I will tell you, Bob, I don't think he understood how
Mm.
much heat
Yes.
um, could be taken
Yeah,
if, and there was a piece of legislation, again, I referenced it, that was extremely radical in terms of taking away local planning authority.
mm.
And, our organization, and with the help of all of our members, fought it, and it did not pass. But, I sometimes am just kind of amazed that some legislators don't understand, if you want to make people mad, if you affect their home values, that is the single most important way that the voting public, you will make them mad. And they will organize, and they will come after you. And
Mm.
it's the one thing in this whole conversation that just seems like a huge disconnect that they don't seem to get. The whole, most council members of towns and cities, they don't want to be caught in this divide between the NIMBYs and the YIMBYs.
Yep.
And, but they are, and they recognize that's sort of part of their duty and authority, and all these things to represent their community and trying to make it the best that they can.
Um,
But why in the world state legislators would want to go get in the middle of the NIMBYs and the YIMBYs? Because if you want to put some political blood in the water, go get in that fight, right?
yeah, it's I mean conditional zoning also requires the consent of both parties, but I mean at the end of the day, as someone who served in local elected office 11 years ago. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get into a food fight and inject yourself into taking something away from a local government that has a big impact on local residents, I mean, I don't disagree that folks don't understand sometimes the consequences of bills that, oh, this sounds great, and at the end of the day, have a negative impact on just everyday regular folks in their neighborhood. so on and so forth. I mean, as we discussed earlier prior to recording this. I mean, the General Assembly in North Carolina pretty much is. I wouldn't say it's considered a full-time legislature. The sessions just they come in, they go out, they come in and come out. I mean, will they be back soon? Are they back now? Or
Yeah, they're I'm trying to look at I think they're back next week
okay,
for a very, I don't know that they're actually going to do any legislating, but it's on their calendar if I remember that correctly. So,
okay. And any of these land use bills that we discussed, Scott, coming up? I mean, I know that the calendar is kind of fluid, right? It could just show up.
um, it's those types of bills won't be considered again until they fully return in the spring. So,
Okay.
I would be shocked to see any of that. That's not out there. This is a little off of the topic of land use planning, but there's a study committee looking at property taxes, so that's something else that's on our radar right now. So,
Yeah, I saw that. Not the state has no budget, but let's get involved in local governments' budgetary processes. I mean, that's a pretty interesting concept.
well, for a few years ago, there was pieces of legislation that were intended to prevent municipalities from reducing their public safety budget. To quote, defund the police. I would suggest when between 40 and 50% of most municipalities' budget is spent, general fund budget is
Yeah.
spent on public safety. If you want to defund the police, this would be the best way to accomplish that.
Yeah, I mean, in Leland, I think between the public safety category, it's well over 30%
Yeah.
is spent on police and fire. And I look public, I mean, I think folks who do building inspection and things like that, that they're public safety too. I mean, making sure that
Sure,
what was
absolutely. Making
built
sure that these buildings are
meets
safe
code.
and built safely. Yeah.
Yes, meets code. They're part of the public safety mix too. And traditionally people think about public safety as as fire and police, but it's a lot more. Hey, listen, I want to thank you for your time. This is a continuous conversation in places that are growing fast. I'm not a last, I'm the last person to be allowed in type of guy. I think that Leland is a really special place. Southeastern North Carolina is a really special place, and it's growing for a reason. It's a really nice place to live. And I'd much rather be in a position where people want to come here as opposed to flee. And I'm sure that there are places in North Carolina, like there were in Virginia, where we lived, that populations were shrinking, and because people couldn't find work, quality of life, etc. So, with that, Scott, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you to NCLM for all that you do. It really is preserving local government, local residents' voices in the state legislature. I have nothing but respect for what you all do and in telling the story of what local government does in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I
We
really
appreciate
appreciate you
it.
having me.